There is no better time to buy veterans than in the offseason right after the season ends. Right now is when everybody is focusing on getting younger, getting unproven talent that might break out, getting draft picks. That's what everybody wants. So veterans come at a massive discount, and time again, we get to the season and everybody remembers veteran wide receivers, veteran quarterbacks, veteran running backs score points just like all of the young assets do. So let's turn our attention to it. Let's get into it. Number one, it's Russell Wilson. And I know what you think. Russell Wilson's not the quarterback he used to be. You're absolutely correct. However, when it comes to fantasy, Russell Wilson is still a producer. And this is where I think we need to really be able to separate the player in actuality, right? The Russell Wilson in the NFL versus the player for fantasy. He was the QB12 in points per game last year with a new offense, with a just downright kind of bad to average wide receiver group, with all of the things swirling behind the scenes that came out towards the end of the season, right? They had asked to basically cut his pay. They're going to bench him. All of that basically weighing on Russell Wilson while he continues to go out and just produce for fantasy purposes. Now, we know he's going to hit free agency. That almost feels like an absolute guarantee. That means he's going to be in another new system. He's going to have to learn another new set of wide receivers. So there's going to be challenges in 2024. But the two likely targets, the two teams that people keep throwing out there, I think are honestly going to be good situations for Russell Wilson to step into and immediately have top 15 success as a fantasy quarterback again. One, the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, well, you have Drake London. You have Bijan Robinson. You have Kyle Pitts. You have potentially another wide receiver, another pass-catching option. Maybe they go after in this year's draft. That's an option. It's going to be Belichick. I think that's what it feels like. That's the consensus that's being floated out there. So you're telling me Bill Belichick with Russell Wilson and those three weapons aren't going to have success? I don't buy that. Like, I think they're going to end up being a pretty good offense led by a very good fantasy quarterback. And the other team that seems to continually be thrown out there is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, look at the situation. A team that I think fits him very, very well. You have Deontay Johnson. You have George Pickens. And honestly, as much crap as I give George Pickens, him with Russell Wilson would just be an absolutely disgusting combination. They would be fantastic. You have Pat Freiermuth, who I think would also thrive with Russell Wilson. And then you have Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris, two good running backs. So I think ultimately that's a good spot as well with Mike Tomlin. I mean, either of those locations, he's a top 15 quarterback next year. He's still got enough talent. He's going to have the weapons in either location. Those are the targets for us with Russell Wilson in 2024. Now, what does it cost to actually acquire him? Again, the ADP is one thing, but the only trade I've seen in January with Russell Wilson is Russell Wilson for Najee Harris straight up. In a super flex league, I'm fine with that. I don't know how long Najee has left in terms of like actual fantasy relevancy. I think Russell Wilson's going to outlast him. And again, if I can get a borderline top 15-ish quarterback, at least in my mind, for the next 2 seasons, I'm going to take that if I can give up a veteran running back that is getting pushed by Jaylen Warren, obviously. Switching gears and looking at the running back position, and yes, I'm talking about trading for a running back in January. There's really only one veteran running back that I'm going to just continue to say, I'm going to buy him until the wheels absolutely fall off. If you watched this last year, hearing James Conner's name is not a surprise. James Conner finishes the year averaging over 15 points per game. Again, he does it with Clayton Tune and Joshua Dobbs and Kyler Murray off of an ACL tear. James Conner goes out and looks as good, arguably, as he has ever looked as a running back. Now, you only got 13 games because, of course, right, it's James Conner. You're just expecting 12 to 13 games. But those 13 games were nothing short of spectacular for a running back at his age. For the first time in his career, he goes over 1,000 yards. He averages 5 yards a carry. And again, all of this is with 3 quarterbacks under center. One of them who shouldn't be in the NFL, Clayton Tune. Another who was traded midseason, Joshua Dobbs. And a third, Kyler Murray, who's coming off of the ACL. So The situation really couldn't have been worse. And he just kind of balled out. It's what he's done every single year in Arizona. As of right now, he has 1 year left on that contract. The Cardinals are like 12th-ish, roughly, in projected cap for 2024. If they need cap space, they can absolutely cut James Conner. They'll save a couple $1 million off of him with $3 million in dead cap. So there's a path he gets cut and has to move on. Even if that happens, I'm fine with James Conner. He has done nothing but look solid with this team. I think he's going to pick up and land with a good team next year as well. If they do move on, I have no concerns about buying James Conner. And when you factor in the price, he's coming off the board as RB32 in startups, but he's even cheaper right now in your dynasty leagues, especially in the offseason. I am buying James Conner on every single contending roster. James Conner and a 2025 fourth for a 2024 third and a 2024 fourth. Yep, that's not even a question. I've also seen him traded for Logan Thomas. Why? Why is that a deal that's happening? I don't understand that. And then James Conner for Khalil Shakir. And look, I know Shakir's looked very solid at the end of this year, right? Over 400 yards in his last 10 games. That's what people are going to get excited about. He made good plays in the playoffs. They're bringing in another wide receiver. Diggs may be gone, but a new alpha is going to step in. They're likely going to throw money at either Mike Evans or Curtis Samuel or another guy that's available in free agency. I'm not getting on the Khalil Shakir train. In fact, if I can trade him as a contender for James Conner, I think that's an easy trade as well. Now, looking at some more traditional, I think is the word, more traditional cheap veteran trade targets at the wide receiver position, we have DeAndre Hopkins, and yes, he's going to be 32 years old. Like, he's old. It's official. DeAndre Hopkins is officially close to done, but I don't think he's done just yet. I think we're getting another solid year out of DeAndre Hopkins. And you may look at the whole season and say, but he finished as wide receiver 30 in points per game. He's clearly slowing down. I don't know if that's 100% true, because when you factor out Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis and basically just not Will Levis games, DeAndre Hopkins was bad. No way around it. However, when you just look at the stretch of games where Will Levis started, he averaged over 15 points per game, 15.4 to be exact. That's in 8 games. That would have been the wide receiver 18 in points per game on the season. Now, again, it's a small sample. It's not a full season, but that's enough for me to get excited, right? And yes, the offensive scheme is going to change. Mike Vrabel's gone. You bring in Callahan from Cincinnati, newly announced as the head coach about 5 minutes before I started recording this. So I think that's going to be a solid offensive scheme. I don't think it's going to necessarily be pass heavy, but with Tajay Spears and Hopkins and Levis, I think that offense is going to have some legs. I am fine rolling the dice, especially for the price, right? He's coming off the board, wide receiver 47 in your startups. That is dirt cheap. And admittedly, right, when we look at the trade finder, he has not been traded once this month. Not a single trade with DeAndre Hopkins in January. His trade value is roughly Jerome Ford, a 2024 third, or Jerry Jeudy. If that's the case, I'm going to make that deal every single time as a contender. And honestly, even if I'm not contending, you're telling me I can give up Jerome Ford, a backup running back, for DeAndre Hopkins, who I think I'd be able to flip for more during the season as a veteran move. I think that's fine too. Our second cheap wide receiver trade target is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, but it's not Mike Evans, because I think right now the Mike Evans price is it's getting a little out of hand for me. Instead, I'm going to go to the cheaper option. I'm going to go to Chris Godwin. Obviously, Godwin about to be 28 years old, coming off the board as wide receiver 37 in ADP. That's also behind 30, soon to be 31-year-old Mike Evans. So he is the cheaper of the two, and I think it makes sense. He had a worse season than Mike Evans. Undoubtedly. Finishes wide receiver 38 in points per game, which is not great. Not what you want to see, especially 2 years removed now from the ACL tear. I think that was disappointing. But when you look beyond just the actual production, when you look at the usage, they're not all that different outside of one, key metric. So when you look at target share, Mike Evans beats him out 24.5% to 23.8%. In real life, that's a difference of 4 targets this year. Not a huge change. The target rate, 25.6 for Mike Evans, 23.6 for Chris Godwin. So obviously targeted at a higher rate, targeted at a higher clip. That makes sense. He had more targets. You look at the red zone targets. Mike Evans had 17. Chris Godwin had 15. The touchdown luck did not fall Chris Godwin's way, but he was used inside of the 20, right? A lot of Mike Evans touchdowns obviously come outside of the red zone because he is still a big play monster, and that plays out in the air yard share here, right? 39.3% to 24.1%. Chris Godwin is still a possession receiver. He is not a stretch the field, do it all type of guy that Mike Evans is, but Chris Godwin is consistent. He is still earning targets, and that's actually his highest target share in his career. So he's earning targets at a solid clip as well. I think he's just going to be a value, right? Does Chris Godwin turn back into a top 15 guy? I don't think so. But top 24, not out of the question. Top 30, absolutely. And again, he's being drafted at wide receiver 37 right now, and he's going a lot cheaper in the trade market. So when you look at the DLF Trade Finder, he's been traded for a mid-2024 second. I'm fine with that. Like, when I'm thinking mid-2024 second, think 206 to 209. Anything earlier, give me the pick. When you get to that range, you're kind of in dart throw territory, right? You're telling me I could have a high-end wide receiver 3 in my eyes with wide receiver 2 upside. I'm going to take that in Chris Godwin as a contender. The other deal here, it's Chris Godwin for Treylon Burks, Rico Dowdle, Cedric Tillman, and a 2024 third. That just feels like somebody's dumping all the crap they want off their roster. So give me Chris Godwin. Like, I think that's an easy deal. It's a load of nonsense for a good wide receiver, and I'm fine to make that every single time. And to close it out, our cheapest wide receiver, our cheapest trade target in the video, it is Mike Williams. Now, you're probably thinking Mike Williams, who tore his ACL. Yes. Mike Williams, who might get cut by the Chargers this year. Yes. Mike Williams, who's going to be 30 years old. Yes. The main reason this is interesting, or he's interesting to me, is he's coming off the board as wide receiver 57 in ADP. There's not a lot of other guys in that range that are ever going to put up some of the continued stretches of greatness that Mike Williams has given us. Mike Williams, this season prior to tearing that ACL, averaged over 16 points per game in the 3 games he was healthy. Pulls in a 22% target share, a 30% air yard share. Mike Williams, when healthy and on the field, earns targets at a high enough clip, catches enough touchdowns, and goes deep often enough that he provides a ton of value for fantasy. Now, obviously, if he does get cut, this is different. Like, this is a different story because you're not tied to Justin Herbert, a guy who is going to throw for 5,000 yards potentially any season for the next decade. It's a very different story, but I'm still going to buy in because right now I'm willing to take a flyer because of the cost. I'm willing to take a chance that he sticks it out for another year here or lands in another offense that's looking for a deep threat wide receiver and still, ends up being a wide receiver 3 or better. Mike Williams and a 2024 fourth for Miles Sanders and Tyler Higbee. Give me the dart throw in Mike Williams. Mike Williams or Jake Browning. Do I want a backup quarterback, or would I rather have a potential wide receiver 3? Give me Mike Williams. Mike Williams for Desmond Ridder. Would I rather have a potential wide receiver 3 or a guy that's about to be unemployed? Mike Williams. And then ultimately, he's also just been traded for like a late 3rd round pick. Give me Mike Williams as a contending roster. Like, that's just an easy choice. The upside Mike Williams brings greatly outweighs what you're giving up to get him. I think he's a very interesting and maybe polarizing cheap trade target. All right, guys, that is all I have for you. Again, thank you for watching. If you have questions, you have comments, drop it down below. If you like what we're doing here, subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.